You know my story, right? Rise to fame from the pain to glory, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is Kervin Aucoin. I am the CEO founder of the private intelligence company Aucoin Analytics. We founded in November of 2018, and we've been pivoting ever since due to the climate of this entire globe.
And let's jump right in a little bit, and we'll talk specifically about the analytics in your company and what it is you all do, and as much as you can share, obviously, in the concept of what you can share there. So start with the beginning, and let's talk about the moment when you transitioned from your career and realized you wanted to take the jump into running your own business.
Yeah, so I signed up for the Army in October of 2001. That's when I officially signed the paperwork. Now, there was a lot that months before going into all of that, taking the ASVAB and things like that. But I signed the paperwork there to become a geospatial intelligence analyst, which is just known as an imagery analyst, taking satellite imagery and then analyzing all of the information that's on there to then effectively create an intelligence product to present to military commanders or government leaders. So that's how my career started. Through the years, through my 15-year military career, I did the imagery stuff. I was also a human intelligence analyst, and then after my first deployment to Iraq, I told my commander, I really want to learn a language. And try to do something that will really challenge me in the future endeavors that I'm going to take. And they said, well, perfect. You can go to the Defense Language Institute, which is in Monterey, California, to study Arabic. The funny thing was I thought maybe, I'd learn Spanish or something pretty easy, maybe even French because of my background, just to do the course, have that, and have that language background. Well, this was 2006, and the global war on terrorism was at its peak, and so there was only one language that our unit was allowing anyone to learn. That was Arabic. And I'm super excited, and looking back on it, I'm thankful and grateful that I was able to do that. It really challenged me. It made me refocus my life, I think. At that same point, I got married. My wife became pregnant. So we're starting a family and doing all of this stuff. So there were all those challenges as well. So after I finished that and did another deployment, the special operations came calling, and I augmented with special operations for about 8 to 10 years, deploying once or twice a year, every year, providing intelligence analysis to special operations forces all over the globe. That's where I really started to travel a lot. Went to a lot of austere locations like Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, obviously. Also all over Africa, where I was able to live on what we would call on the economy or within the community. So we'd have a house in the middle of the city, and between our work, we would do whatever we wanted to do in the city, and I really loved that. And I used my intelligence background to just kind of identify what's going on there, help other people while they were coming out. If we had new guys coming out to certain cities or locations that we were at, I would try to help them so that when they get into the country, they can integrate very easily. And that was the point where I thought, I could probably really do this from a civilian level. And at that point, I was still traveling to Africa. I traveled to Poland. We sort of did this overt. So I work a lot in covert. That was a lot of special operations, but going into Poland was the first time I very much worked as an intelligence analyst in the overt market, which means everyone knew we were there, why we were there, and it was overt anti-Russian aggression. And that was 2017, and we see what has happened now within Ukraine with Russia. So at that point in 2017, the Polish people were very concerned about what Russia was going to do in that country. And I think their worries were justified in 2022, in February of 2022. So doing that sort of overt and anti-Russian aggression, I really felt myself thinking I missed my entire family's, like all my kids. I have 3 kids, and they're between the ages of 15 and 20 right now. I missed their entire lives, and that still hurts me on a very singular level, that I wasn't there for them for everything. I during their most formidable years, the years that parents work the hardest to develop their worldview and their personalities, I wasn't there, and I left that all to my wife. Something I struggle with even today. So that was when I decided, I've got to stop doing this. I've got to stop doing this, what we would call targeting, find, fix, and finish, meaning you find the enemy, you fix onto their location, and then you destroy the enemy, you kill that person. And that really did a number on my mental health. And so all of those things converging at once, I decided I needed to get back home and find a job that I can do that can actually help people, bring people back. And within that, I could be with my family again and stay with them, work a 9-to-5 job where I'm back home every day. And luckily, a terrific organization and agency had a position open on the civilian side, needing an analyst to do lessons learned for personnel recovery. So I signed on as an independent contractor to be an analyst for personnel recovery. Well, because I'm a 1099 and independent contractor, I set up a business just to, for tax purposes and things like that. But as I'm doing it, I just decide, that I've got this great opportunity with JPRA to do great things for the warfighter. But I have this other time that I can use maybe to provide intelligence analysis to the civilian side, not just the Department of Defense or the military. I could do something for the civilian side. And so that was about January of 2020. I started to, create the brand that is Aucoin Analytics right now. From that, there was a former intelligence officer who's living in South Carolina now. He had put out a request looking for intelligence analysts to help him within a what's called a protective intelligence or travel security. Within the travel security, what we would do is take high-level leadership, CEOs from Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and if they're going overseas or they're traveling, we would provide everything that they need, right? The right flights, the right hotel locations, giving contacts for people who are in country that they're going to be in that can help them out. So it's a full suite business helping these individuals out. So it was January of 2020. We signed the contracts and we were ready to go. He was building up a software that people could go into and kind of, they would go into, they'd sign up, and then they would get all of the information that they need, all the intelligence that they need. And so he's working on that, and we're going back and forth on how to fine tune everything. And we have a set date that we want to release this, and that date was going to be in April of 2020. And as we all know, April of 2020 was probably the worst day for travel in human history, maybe. So that was the shutdown dates from COVID. So that was the moment all travel stopped, and we kept it going. He said that he was hearing things that in the next 6 months it might open up. So we kept feeding money into it just to keep it propped up. That way, when travel does open back up, we'll get this rush of people coming in for all this intelligence, and that never happened. And it was just too cumbersome to keep open. And, as a business, we decided to go our separate ways. Now we are still really good friends and we still work together on a lot of things. He's a very, is Peter Morton is his name. He's still does Predictive intelligence right now. And so he went his separate way. And then I had to figure out, what am I going to pivot to? Should I just shut all of this down and go back to just doing what I was doing as an independent contractor? Or do I figure something else out? And, I sat on it for a few months. And then in 2021, after seeing, everything that had gone on with COVID and all of the massive amounts of misinformation and disinformation that were being put basically based off of your politics and how your, what worldview and what bias you had is what you believed was really going on. And as an analytical, logical thinker, I read all of these things going, all of these people arguing back and forth, thinking they're right or the other person's wrong or any of that stuff, that you are both wrong. Even my initial emotional reactions are wrong. And then I understood that at that point, intelligence, which is supposed to be unbiased and it's supposed to be logical, you get all this information in and you analyze it logically and you put out factual, unbiased information. I figured this is something that can be used onto the civilian market for people who are just out there confused about everything that's going on around them and how it affects them personally. And so then I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to provide intelligence reports for anyone and everyone who may need it. I'll do travel. I will take big geopolitical events and I will offer up ideas on how to protect yourself, keep yourself protected, how to do various things to protect your finances, your family. And it was at that point where I decided, I'm doing all of this, writing it all down. Not everybody is like me, a visual learner who needs to read a lot of stuff. Some people just want to hear it. And as somebody who does like to talk a lot, I decided I should probably do a podcast that takes all of these big geopolitical events that are happening. This was, summer of 2021. I was already identifying things at the U.S. southern border that were going on, that being infiltrated by various terrorist organizations, adversarial countries. I also noticed a push from Russia to go onto the border, their border with Ukraine, and there was a possibility that a major conflict could be coming up. So we started the podcast, and I was going to do this solo. I was going to be, one of those guys who just talk. You think of all the political guys like a Ben Shapiro who can just talk about all these big political things. I was going to take the politics out of it and just offer an intelligence side of view. And I immediately, as I'm recording for the first time, understand that I cannot do that. That is not who I am. I've never sat alone by myself and just talked into the ether. And I knew, well, this isn't going to work. So I've got to pivot again. I'm going to need somebody else there going back and forth with me. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. And so I went to my wife, Tiana, and I said, you've been so supportive in all of this. I need a co-host. Would you mind doing this just for a little while so that we can build it up and then we'll go from there? And, she was very cautious about it. She's not somebody who wants to be out there, who wants her face on everything. She definitely doesn't want her voice everywhere and people knowing who she is. But God bless her, because she said, I love you and I support you so much. And I think what you're doing is an incredible thing. And so I will do this with you for a while. So we did. And those first episodes aren't out anymore, not because we said anything that was outlandish, but because any podcaster will agree with this. Those first few episodes are the worst. You're trying to get your feel for it. It gets frustrating. They're very short episodes, but we kept doing it, and it turned into something not that I was thinking it was going to turn into. And it started, I think, December of 2021. I believe it was December 3rd was the episode we put out, where through all of my analysis, I realized what was happening on the border between Russia and Ukraine. And I did historical views. I brought in data from all over and said, I think I know the date that this is going to happen. And I mentioned it on that episode. In February, after the Winter Olympics in Beijing, Putin is going to make that move into Ukraine. It's most likely going to be the moments after the closing ceremony. I had a lot of people. We didn't have a lot of listeners, maybe 20 to 30 listeners at that time, and they were mostly friends and family. But the majority of them either said, I think you're wrong, I know you're wrong, or I hope you're wrong. And the I hope you're wrong I get very, very much. Like, I hoped I was wrong as well, but I could see it. And so I let it keep going. And we kept harping on it, hoping somebody would listen. Putin met with Emmanuel Macron in France. That image of this 8-foot table with the two of them at opposite ends. And Macron came out of that and said, I trust this guy, and he says he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. And that was the moment I was like, the world leaders don't even understand what's going on. That is how backwards we are right now. And then the moment happened, they invaded Ukraine, and that's when our podcast kind of blew up on a micro level. I remember that day. My wife and kids had gone down to Louisiana, where we're from. We had a family thing that happened. And so I was home by myself, and I had gotten COVID at that point, and my voice was gone. And I just had journalist after journalist reaching out. Hey, can I talk to you? Can I talk to you? And I was completely just done at the end of that day. It was a wild experience. And I think that was a turning point for me, that, I say a lot of things, and, maybe there's some things I don't even believe that I'm saying, but I'm putting it out there. But that, I think I am understanding this correctly, maybe, and I get things wrong, and that's always going to happen. But if I keep to the task that is intelligence, then I think taking my worldview and my bias out, my political views out, and presenting just the facts of it, that I am actually giving people factual information that they can use to better their lives. And through that, what we found with the podcast is, this whole conversation that Tiana and I have every week on the podcast becomes, cathartic. It literally is. The conversations we have on the podcast are the conversations that we're having. Like, we record Thursday nights, and it comes out on Fridays, but Saturday to Thursday, those are the conversations we're having in the house. Big news pops up, and there's different news articles, and we're texting back and forth these news articles and trying to understand what is going on in this world. And we have now this space on the podcast to come together and bounce those ideas off of each other and try to figure out, what is going on. And so that has been the trajectory. And so the podcast has become what I've focused on a lot more than the business, just because I'm still trying to figure out how to market it to the civilian consumer, because for good reason, the civilian consumer doesn't understand why they would even need it. Why am I going to spend money on something that I don't even know what it is? So we're trying with the podcast to show what that is and how it's beneficial. And to that effect, hopefully it turns into, it's a very novel idea. There is no, basic intelligence, private intelligence for the civilian consumer, for the guy or gal, the couple, the family that's making it day to day, paycheck to paycheck. They don't get this information that your Mark Zuckerbergs of the world get on a day to day basis, who can have a full suite intelligence program. They don't get that. And I don't like that. I want to offer that to everyone. And, I've offered it up to people for free. I had friends go to France a year ago, and they just hit me up and said, "Hey, we're going to France. What do you know? Anything?" There were huge protests going on at that time. That was the time frame when France was on fire. There's that photo of the people sitting outside of a restaurant eating, and across from them is just trash burning in the streets, and they're just sipping their wine and eating. So I provided that for free because I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about people's safety and security. I've offered up, I've also done intelligence for companies that have gone into Ukraine and have pulled civilians out of Ukraine and done cross-border operations. That was paid for. It was for profit, but I could have done it for free, and it would have meant the same to me because we've saved people's lives at that point. And those are my passions. I end my podcast every time. It's what I would call my catchphrase or whatever. And it's always stay safe out there. And I truly mean that. It's not just some phrase that I say. I tell it to people on a day-to-day basis. I'm in Las Vegas right now, and I see people walking around the streets, and we'll say hi or have an interaction. And I always end it with stay safe out there. So I think that's the most important thing.
I think there's so many valuable aspects that everybody needs to understand with your podcast and your story, that also going to the podcast, and there's a lot of things to dissect in what we just talked about in all positive way, to be honest with you. I think that what you're doing with the podcast now, realizing your actual intent of the analytics company, I think the podcast is exactly that. It's the showing, not selling, because I think we also live in a world where, exactly like you said, it's not, you have to distill down the most, let's just say the most engaged and confused, consumed things online are distilled, complicated things that are distilled down to a very digestible manner. And I think that that's what your podcast does for me specifically. I am a fan of your podcast. I love everything about it. I also love, and I used a phrase just now that actually was better articulated than what was in my head, which was no politics, all intelligence. And it's like, that was really, like, you see so many times how, and I do curse on here, so I apologize, all the bullshit media stuff where it's like fair and balanced and all these other things, but it's all bullshit in the end because they're driving you to the sponsor, or they're driving you to this. This is just straightforward, and it's no politics, all intelligence. And what are they selling? They're selling intelligence. So if you want further intelligence, then yeah, reach out to Kervin and start a conversation. But there's no gimmicks, there's no anything, there's no ulterior motives. This is everything distilled down in a non-biased way. And if you want deeper, there's a paid option down the road that we can talk about customly. That right there is such a powerful, number one, lead generation opportunity for your business. But number two, public service. It is a huge public service that you're doing every week. And I know that aside from the non-politics and just the intelligence and the current events, I want people to watch it from a humanistic standpoint and listen to it in the way, because there is no fear mongering. There is no elevated voices. It's the delivery is in a calm and demeaning way that allows you to digest the information. And also, for anybody that's aspiring to be married or is married, take note of the way that they interact with each other, because there is such compassion and empathy and respect between the two of you as you interact, even to the points where, like, I love where she, like, where your wife talks about being overwhelmed this week and working hard, and she's like, you gotta, and I love the delivery, and I loved how it was like, you break away from the intelligence for a human moment, and it's organic, and it's not like a script where you're like, oh, let's pause to be married. You guys are just being yourselves. And I really just want to bring that forward as well, because yes, it's about the intelligence and it's about being safe, but there is a real big human element to that people can relate to as far as that goes on. Even if you're not into current events, it's a great listen to hear you two interact and deliver such powerful information.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you, because you don't know, and I say this a lot to people all the time, you will never know what that does for me on a personal level and how it does to my mental health. I've got tons of mental health issues from my background that we just won't get into, but just hearing that, because you put your voice out there into what I was to put into the ether, and sometimes we'll get an email or something like that. But if no one's telling you, you could have 6 million people listening, and if no one is saying, hey, I really appreciated what you said, or I appreciate your delivery and how you did that and how it affected me on a personal level, why why keep doing it? I don't care how many people listen. I care about how many people are affected in a positive way by it. And I found over the last year, being a content creator now, I guess, because we've gotten thousands of people on Instagram and we do things on X and stuff like that, that now my biggest pet peeve are grifters. And a grifter is exactly what you explained. It is, oh, look, this is, we're fair and balanced, but not really. We're grifting. We are going to try, like, we have done all the analytics to identify who is listening, what the personality of those people are, and what they want to hear. And it's not what that person believes. It is what they think the listener wants to hear, and even what other listeners don't want to hear, so that they have an angry, emotional response to what they're saying. And the only thing they want is money. That is what it's all about. You will see posts on Twitter/X all the time, and these people are grifters. They are either a person who just is trying to get money and saying stuff they don't believe, or they are a adversarial foreign country, or a foreign asset that is putting stuff out to engage with the US population, the Canadian population, whatever population it is, to sow those seeds of discord within the population, to disrupt. Like what's going on in the US right now with people bickering back and forth on Twitter. And I'm going to say this right now. I appreciate you saying you curse on the podcast, because now you've opened up my vocabulary a bit. So the bickering back and forth doesn't mean shit. Like this social bickering back and forth that we're talking about is a distraction for what's coming up. And I can tell you from my experience and the job that I do and the briefings that I am in on a day-to-day basis, that a global conflict is coming. And it didn't start with Russia invading Ukraine. It is starting with a blockade of Taiwan, or the reunification of Taiwan into the Chinese Communist Party. That is going to start a global conflict. And people may think, why the hell do I care about Taiwan? We're America. We're on the cusp of a civil war. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or anything. We are on the cusp of a civil war. That happened. The assassination attempt of Donald Trump has really started something that is turning into something very evil in this country. And that has nothing to do with politics or anything like that. Anyone who would try to assassinate another political person is changing what's happening in this country. So why, if we have all these problems, why do I care about Taiwan? Well, I can tell you this right now. If China is successful in reunifying Taiwan, they will then build a blockade in the Indo-Pacific that at that moment makes the US at the very least the number 2 superpower. At the worst, they are down to 4. We're down to 4, 5. So who cares about that? The US, what do we care if the US is the second superpower and China is the first? The US dollar is the currency of the world right now. Now, China with BRICS and BRICS Plus, they're trying to build their own currency. If the US falls as a superpower, the dollar falls, that's global economic collapse. That's on a global scale. So you're talking Western Europe collapses, North America collapses. This is scary. I mean, it keeps me up at night thinking about this. And the reason I'm up at night is not because I don't think that our military can do it. I'm working with them right now. I talked to somebody just yesterday that we talk about this generation and how lazy or whatever, and every generation says that about the future generation. I'm working with these guys. They are prepared for a fight in maybe the most emotional way possible. They're not lazy. They are intelligent, hardworking, and they know that if this happens, they may not come back, and they're ready to make that sacrifice. So that's not what worries me. What worries me is when I step on social media and I see no one worried about that, and they're only worried about these social issues that, can we just please leave people alone? Just let people go and be people and worry about what really matters. You know, what matters to everyone on an individual level is, how does this affect your bank account? Money is you know, they'll say the root of all evil, but it's what makes things keep moving. And we all want to be comfortable, and we all want to be able to afford things and pay for our families. And this conflict, if China is successful, would obliterate that. And so I think we need to stop focusing. That's what we're trying to do with the podcast, is we don't talk about social issues because I don't think it's important. I think it's.
Yeah, and I
Sorry,
appreciate. No, you're good. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying too, and bringing up that different angle, because it's not a different angle. It's actually, I mean, I'm not giving you credit. I want to give other context to what you're saying coming into it. Is like, I was recently watching. I watch stuff from other countries online intentionally. So I intentionally consume other lenses of us. And one of the things was watching, even though it is through CBS or anything like that, it was 60 Minutes Australia, and 60 Minutes Australia did an expose recently on the waters and talking about similar scenarios, and it was very interesting. And I'm just like, all I could think about is, why is this not on 60 Minutes USA? Like, why is, because it was like the complete opposite lens of everything that we've been exposed to. You know, it's not on our television. I go online intentionally and find those streams and those broadcasts. And I'm sure there's a more efficient way for me to do it, but everybody knows that I'm doing stories that I'm very manual, but that's how I learn. So it's I learn observing. With what you're saying though, you're not fear mongering, because you're giving facts. And one thing that I very much strongly feel like, and I'm not versed in the world, in your world, but I am versed in social and society and things that go on. And I'm very perceptive to when things are shifting, and from an energy standpoint, as well as overall tension as well. And I can tell you, no matter where the paths are of everybody's arguments of the recent assassination attempt, oh, it's an inside job, oh, it was this, oh, it was that. It doesn't matter what it was. The fact is, it happened. And like you just said, it is an imprint on the timeline of our lives that has changed in a directional energy from a lot of people, and a lot of people who may have good positive intentions and a lot of people who have bad positive intentions. No matter which path you choose, and no matter what the answer ends up being, regardless, it's a tipping point of our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you nailed it when you analyzed that. It was, you know, oh, well, this was an inside job, or this was this, or, you know, it was a left-wing conspiracy. It's a right-wing conspiracy. You're looking at it in the wrong way if you're thinking that way, because like you said, it happened. Regardless of whatever conspiracy. And I always tell people, the reason conspiracies can thrive, and you see now, there's this new statement that people go, conspiracies are 100%, you know, they've turned out to be 100% correct, right? Everybody says that. Oh, you remember that conspiracy? Now you see it's true. And the reason they can say that is because you sprinkle a little bit of truth onto the conspiracy. You know, the MK Ultra, right? So the CIA was giving psychedelic drugs, and the conspiracy is so that they mind control for the current population in order to prop up the US government in the way that they wanted to prop it up. That's what is a causation does not equal correlation. That's what that is. So that's what the conspiracy is. Here's a little bit of sprinkle of truth. Yep. Did the CIA do this? Yes, they did. Now you have people that are formulating why they did it, and that becomes the conspiracy. So, you see, it was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump was an abject failure for local law enforcement and the Secret Service. That's just the truth.
Right. No matter what your opinion is, it was a breakdown communication, breakdown security across the board. Yeah.
Yep. And so, that's the important thing. Whenever you throw in these conspiracies of it was the CIA or it was the Democratic Party or it was the Republican Party or the bullet didn't even hit him, it was a shard of glass, things like that, you lose focus on what's important, and that's the breakdown. Now, in talking about it, people would say, oh, the one photo was of one of the snipers and he had some sort of bracelet on his wrist that was, I guess, some far left, or they mentioned it was a far left group, and so he was part of this far left group, and that's why he didn't shoot the shooter before that person shot at Donald Trump. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a sniper, you can, the rules of engagement are there so that you cannot engage that person, because had they engaged that person because he had a rangefinder, they thought he had a rangefinder, or they thought he had a weapon, and it ends up that he had a video camera or a digital camera.
Right now, just so you have context, I'm sitting about an hour from that location right now.
Okay.
And I can tell you, this is rural America. I'm outside this window. I've watched 15 four-wheelers go by with rebel flags and American flags. And I go with stay where you are, because I want people to realize that if you want those that are protecting you to act impulsively without all the information, this is the stuff that can happen. And I can say that sitting in this window right now up in this attic, if I was in that scenario when we were having the presidential thing here and I was a sniper, I'd had 15 prospects right there that just drove by on four-wheelers, because they also had guns with them just now as they were riding by. Why? Because it's rural Pennsylvania and it's a beautiful Sunday. So they're riding around and they're going to shoot guns on their farms and go to their friends' houses and just live their lives. So you're 100% right in that. Understand the context of where you are. Also, you can't just impulsively, just because some guy pulls out a scope and he's on top of a roof, just pop him in the head, be done with it.
Yeah. At that point, you do that and you find out it wasn't nefarious. Okay, we have chaos at that point. Now the headlines are different. The headlines are the Trump campaign is killing rural Americans for no reason, or
and then the other people would use it in the other lens, and it would just insert a different former president and president. You know what I mean? It's just like it all becomes this fixated script that then becomes repetitive in everybody's mind, and it cycles through, like I call it the ESPN Sports Center, or even Morning Joe, or any of those shows where they say they're in a 4-hour block, but they're really not, because it's 20 minutes, and then they literally replay the last 20 minutes, and then they piece it together and to make it look like it's a cohesive hours-long conversation. It's exactly what people do, and it really frightens me. I appreciate you bringing this up, because it scares me so much for people's perceptions and perspectives of things they know nothing about. And I used to do that. I'm only recent in backing off and not contributing, because it's like I don't know anything about that. All I know is it happened. You know what I mean? And that's what comes down to at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it happened, because either way, in this type of scenario, either way, we need to be prepared for something bad to happen. And that's not fear-mongering. That's just the fact that this is a tipping point.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm trying to help out people here is, if something does happen, God forbid something does happen, this is how you can protect yourself. But I really want to get back to what you said about seeing things through the lens of, where it happened and how it happened. And, I was brought up in rural Louisiana, and it was very conservative Christian, and I was brought up in the church, and I was a youth pastor, and I was very involved in the church. I'm no longer involved in the church. That doesn't mean, my religious beliefs are one way or another. But I recently saw a post that somebody put out that said, maybe God didn't intend for us to have access to the amount of information that we have access to. And there was a 1800s newspaper article, and I want to say it was in the New York Times, but it was on the onset of the telegram. So now newspapers were getting information from Europe and elsewhere in Asia within, it was within hours, right? And think about that in the way we get information right now. We get it instantaneously. It is within milliseconds. We know exactly what's happening in the Middle East. And so this scientist, or this I think he was a scientist, he wrote in an opinion piece with the New York Times. And he said, what does it matter that we know what's going on in Europe in a few hours as opposed to a few days? It doesn't matter. Let the information come out, let the investigations happen, and then give us the information. And that really struck me. And that's why I do what I do. That's why we do the podcast weekly and not every single day, because now we'll put stuff out on Instagram. And very early on, I was doing breaking news, because I've scraped a lot of different information through the Telegram channels, X, various websites. And so I was getting information very quickly, and I could put that out to our audience very quickly. But what I understood was that I was going against my intelligence training, and I was just putting out information. So you'll see a lot of what these accounts that are called OSINT accounts, open source intelligence. And really what they're not open source intelligence, what they really are is open source information. So what they're doing is they're taking all the information. Just recently Hezbollah struck a soccer field in the Golan Heights in Israel. The OSINT accounts would go, this happened. This is intelligence. This is what happened. That's not intelligence. That's information. You're telling me what happened. Intelligence is, why it happened, and then what are the secondary and tertiary effects of what happened. That's the intelligence. So having this access to all of this information without being able to let the investigation happen, especially in the case of the assassination attempt, it really muddies the waters of our conversations. So that's really what I'm trying to focus on now as a podcast, and why I don't think we will do a daily podcast. I think it's going to stick to a week. And for those people who are like myself, who have to have information constantly, and you need to, like, I have FOMO, I've got fear of missing out. That is 100% who I am. I have to have all the information right there. It's not good for your mental health. And I have identified that. And what has helped me is letting the investigation happen, letting the things come out, and then I put the intelligence out there. This is what happened. This is why it's important. And these are the secondary and tertiary effects of that, and how you can protect yourself, or what to prepare yourself for in the future.
It's almost interesting. Like it would be an interesting experience to have your guests continue to grab everything in the moment, and then just know that they're going to wait to make a decision until they listen to your podcast. And like that would be a great structure for your audience, is like consume all week long. You know what I mean? But just like, don't jump to conclusions. Don't start a fight with your grandma until you heard the episode. You know what I mean? But and I don't mean to humorize it, but I do mean to make it an everyday thing. I do want people to not listen to this and say, I don't care about current events, because I've actually had people say, like, I don't care about current events. And it blows me away, because the problem is you don't care about current events because you think of it only in the lens of CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and all that stuff. And yeah, you don't have to consume it that way if that's not for you. I know a lot of people in my family and friends that prefer to consume it that way. I don't recommend it because it's newstainment, but at the same time, if that's the way you want to consume, then that's the way you're going to consume. But if you actually want the information and the data, and that's why you're watching those channels, know that that's not what those channels are giving you. And I think that that's really what your podcast is, a great way of distilling down a very complicated thing. And I don't think for you, especially, and you would have such a big team every day, and plus at the end of the day, it would be so much effort, and it could be wrong, because you went down the wrong path before, because you're not in the weeds and on the field with those people. So there is a respect that you have to give to that process, and that's really a great philosophy to have for your podcast as well. Is like, we're only giving it to you when we're comfortable giving it out, and that also goes against the trends of society where creators want to work to the algorithm. And my partner and I, with this podcast, a lot of people are like, oh, you guys don't have millions of views, you must not be doing anything. Well, it's not that. We're being very strategic. And it's like you said as well, we're not playing to the algorithm as much as we're putting the right things in the algorithm. So we believe the long-term game is eventually it'll be seen, and eventually it'll be grabbed by the right person. And I think that your philosophy is very much the same. It's like, you're not looking to get every eyeball. You only want the eyeballs that are actually going to pay attention, because at the end of the day, if they're just listening to you for white noise, then it's not really valuable to them nor valuable to anybody else. So I want to pivot in 1 second of how you want to know how you learn. I know that's a very loaded question, but we talked about learning Arabic, and there you go. Ironically, did you hear the gunshot? There you go. So, I told you I wasn't joking. Yeah, they're out shooting guns. It's a nice Sunday, and that's rural Pennsylvania for you. So there's gunshots in the distance. There you go. Hopefully it'll stop before we go there. But where I want to go is how you learn, and I want you briefly walk past. And I love that about your personality, learning Arabic and all these things. And I'm like, how do you process and learn things? Is it, like you said, you're absorbing via text of the different aggregations that you're doing, and are you also doing firsthand account to supplement that? And kind of walk through as much as you can of your process without all the secrets, I guess.
Yeah. And I am trying to go outside of covert, secret, and intelligence isn't secret. And what I tell a lot of people is, the information that comes out through intelligence isn't what's classified. It's the ways and means that a government or a military does that is classified. So, to say, hey, North Korea is going to attack, this is not happening. I'm just hypothetical here. North Korea is going to invade South Korea, next week. That's not classified, right? If that were to come out. The classified is, how did we get that? Satellite data, signals intelligence, human intelligence on the ground. So how I do my stuff, and not getting into proprietary information, but so you start with a ton of data, and it's just everywhere right now. We all have the information, and so you've got to whittle that information and that data into a very something that you can actually read and take in. So you get all the data, you put it together, you kind of weed out all the rest of it that's just out there, and you take it from both sides. So I say this on the podcast all the time, I give both sides equal footing. So we talk about Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine says Russia did something. I will say, now Russia says they didn't do it. That's part of the data that comes in, and you've got to filter that out through what you know about misinformation or how governments work. So you get all that information in, and then you start piecing it together, and you start identifying trends in the analysis. So you see various phrases within it. You talk about the border, Russia putting troops on the border. You get all that information, and then you see on multiple occasions there are talks of potential movement west into Ukraine. You just keep seeing it. Potential escalation, potential conflict, probable conflict. And you identify, okay, now I'm seeing this is happening a lot. Then, within my network, which is something I've been able to build up through my military career and stuff, I can talk to people. I can talk to people within Poland who are on the ground. That's human intelligence. So you get information from humans on the ground. Hey, what are you seeing? I'm hearing there's a lot of stuff going on here, but what are you seeing actually on the ground? So we talk about, oh, there's a violent mob that's just completely demolishing this city. And you talk to the people in the city, and you say, hey, I'm hearing that there's this mob that's marching on the city. What are you seeing? And you would get one of two answers, right? Yeah, I'm within the mob and they are moving and there's the potential that this could escalate. Or they would say, I'm in this location and it's like 4 or 5 people who are just causing a ruckus. I think it's going to die down in a little bit. And so how you feel about that, what we would call a source, how you feel about that source and the confidence you have in that source gives you a confidence level. Now, within military intelligence, there's a set TTP for putting confidence ratings. I have my own that I've developed working conventional and special operations and wanting to give it out to the civilian consumer. And that is that I have it as unlikely, possible, or probable. And so unlikely is anything that I feel is between a 0 to 15% chance that it would happen. Possible, I go from that 16% to a 50%. And then 51 to 99%, I'm never at 100%. I will always caveat that with I'm never at 100% unless it actually happens, because humans are too volatile to understand that they're going to actually do something. Even the invasion of Ukraine was, I had it at 92% just before it happened. So I was at probable. I was telling people it happened. There's that 8% unlikely 8% chance that all of this could resolve on its own. And so then you build that through all of your sources. I use multi-sourced intelligence, which means imagery, human, signals intelligence, all done unclassified. We have now SOCMINT, which is social media intelligence, OSINT, open source intelligence, and I don't just use one. I try to never just use one source, so that I put all those together, and then I can formulate the intelligence, put it into a way that's concise and easy to understand for anyone who's reaching out for it. So that's how that process works, and what I have learned, because you asked about how I learn things and maybe what I've learned. What I've learned about myself is what I was talking about with that time. Let time pass. And so my wife and I really learned this during the Hamas-Israel conflict, because I think we were on two separate ends of that conflict early on, and they were both emotional responses to what was going on. I am a former U.S. military personnel. I have worked with the IDF, with the Israelis, because they are the biggest ally to the United States. And I was very much pro-Israeli. I still am very much pro-Israeli. That's just me and who I am. And I think that they are on the right side with flaws. Everybody has flaws. And she is very much a humanitarian person. So anything that's happening to civilians, especially children, is gonna have that emotional response. And we got into a lot of arguments over what was going on. Those conversations we have on the podcast, like I said, were going on in our house of, did you see what the IDF just did? They killed 150 civilians. And then I would say, well, you don't know it's 150 civilians because Hamas runs the medical group there, and they are the one giving the news media those numbers. And she would say, I see the pictures of children who have died in the blast. And then I would say, yeah, well, Hamas is using them as human shields. And then she would go, what the fuck does that even mean, Kervin? Like, children are still dying. Why don't you even care? There's a line in a song that really hit me one day from a band, no longer a band anymore, but I love the band. And they said, when did I turn in my bleeding heart for a selfish win? And that really hit me when I was thinking about it. I was like, when did I do that? I'm trying to win in this argument and show that I'm right. And I just threw my heart away because I couldn't understand. I couldn't see it from that perspective. So that was the moment I realized emotion is that first response you get. And whether you're right about the facts in that emotional response, the decisions you make in that emotional response are the wrong decisions. If you let time pass and let the investigation happen in your own mind, and form your own opinions on it, you can come to the right reaction over time. And it's going to be different from that initial reaction. But that's what the media wants, is that initial reaction. That's what they're trying. That's what I have exposed that this 24/7 news cycle is out for. These grifters are out for. They want the emotional response, and then you forget about it because they're going to be wrong. And then you're going to forget about it. And you're still going to follow them, forgetting that they were wrong 2 months ago. And still following that same account.
And you got to realize when you're they want you to get excited, and they want you to have these conversations with your family because they want you to be referring to their news channel and their thing, because it's just all marketing. And then while you're in that heightened state, and I hate to like make a rough transition, but it's similar to the way like right now. So recently we turned off monetization on Spreaker because I do a lot of things on addiction and recovery. And what I found was, on Spreaker, what I was getting, the number one monetization I was getting was from gambling and casinos. And I didn't know that, but that was the number $1 that was coming in. And on Friday, I messaged my partner and texted him. We didn't have a conversation. It was a screenshot of our gap, and it said, look who jumped in and is capitalizing on our audience. And we both said, turn it off. And so we turned off monetization on the audio podcast because you couldn't control it. So we're going to go into a more formatted way where we control the sponsors and we control the ads, because it's exactly that. And that's it in real life. I mean, that's from a scale of a CNN to a Fox News to a small podcast. The grifters are looking for the weaknesses of emotion, and they want those people like you and people like me that aren't doing superficial, like podcasts about gimmicky things, and we're actually bringing core emotions and core beliefs out. That is a beacon of vulnerability for those advertisers. And the more strength people like you and I can show, we can be vulnerable and we can be open, but fuck you if you want to make money off of it.
Yeah. And so that's something that I wasn't in content creation. I didn't want to become some influencer, and I'm not an influencer. I hate to tell everybody who is influenced by me, maybe. I'm not an influencer. I'm still trying to learn all these things, but in getting up to it, and we started to get some more and more followers on Instagram. So I figured, hey, let me take some courses on, the algorithm for Instagram and how to promote myself more. And what I learned through that really hit me was to look authentic, but don't be authentic.
Manufactured
look like
this.
Yes. Everything you see on social media is not everything. Like I said, not everything's 100%. But the influencers that you follow that show these perfect lives, even these messed up lives that they have, that's all built for the algorithm. They were told, if you do this, even those genuine YouTube videos of somebody who is like breaking down, crying, and they're like, I'm going to be very authentic with you guys. That was told to them by a team. And I don't think people understand this. The majority of those content creators have a team around them, a PR team that will tell them, this is what you need to do. They will have a social media team that says, hey, you posted a picture about your failures at the beach that made you get a divorce. Do more of that. Even if it's not authentic, you need to do more of that. Go get married again and then get divorced, because that's going to help you build your audience. And it was very inauthentic to me. And so I stopped doing that. So if you look at our account on Instagram and look at other news accounts, I follow Ground News. I love all of Ground News is an incredible news organization. They do a lot of great unbiased news. Tangled News is the same thing. I've talked to the CEO before. He's an incredible person just trying to get information out there. But what they do that I won't do is they censor themselves. Hamas is a big one. You will see Hamas written as HXMXS, because if you write Hamas into something on Instagram, it will, or if you do that on YouTube, it's going to demonetize your account. If you do it on Instagram, you're not going to get as many eyes on that as you would. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to censor myself to put correct factual information out there. If you see it, you see it. If you don't, understand that Instagram is controlling what you see, and maybe, you know, you need to do something else about that. I don't think we're vocal enough about it. We are very vocal that they are building this algorithm from a political sense, right? We're downplaying conservative voices, or we're downplaying progressive voices, but they're downplaying everything to build up something that will make it more.
I think everybody keeps focusing on their voices, but really, if you step back, and I know you look at things this way too, they're downplaying voices.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and it's like, unless you're, and it's a struggle that I've had my entire life with having a full-time job, a real job, and at a real job with a real corporation and all this stuff, is because I've never been a yes man. I walked away from six figures because I was told that the company was turning corporate, and they knew who I was, and they gave me an option. They put an envelope on the table, and they said, you can go and you can start your life on your own, or you can stay and become a yes man. But I run the show, not me, but they said, we run the show, and there's no more creativity. And, you know,
do you want a story about how we are very similar?
Yeah.
Let me tell you a quick story of my first deployment in Iraq, and I'm part of the intelligence team for our company. And we are, so this was 2005, so it's the heart of the Iraq War, where I'm in Baghdad. We're getting bombed day in and day out, and this major comes in, and he looks at me, and I can't remember the exact thing that was going on, but he was like, I need you to tell me, you know, where the enemy is so we can go get it right there. And I didn't know at that point. We were still doing an analysis of where to go. And he kept going and going. And he was like, I need it now. You have to give it to me now. And he kept pressuring me and pressuring me. And I literally stood up and put my hand down the back of my pants, pulled it out, and said, sir, do you want me to grab it out of my ass right now? Or do you want me to give you the truth? And that was the moment. That was not a good moment for me, from a military sense, because I did get pulled into the office and have a stern talking to. But that's the personality, and it's very much what you were talking about. Do you want me to pull it out of my ass, or do you want me to tell you the truth?
Yeah, and that's back to in closing. I want to get everybody back in here and really focusing on your handles. I want to get back to the podcast here in closing. I want everybody repeat for everybody what the name of the podcast is, where platforms are, and I want everybody to know that this is not the last conversation that Kervin and I are going to be having. This is phenomenal, and this is phenomenal information. I just want to say thank you. I said it off camera yesterday, and I want to tell you again today. Thank you for everything you're doing. I really appreciate the mutual respect you've given me, and I love the conversations we've been having, and I look forward to this ongoing relationship.
I really appreciate you letting me come on, making me comfortable. I do a few of these, and I never really feel comfortable, but your style and the setup of this podcast, and I'm not kissing ass or anything like that. And I told you this yesterday, that I have a rotation of 5 podcasts, and most of them are sports, because I'm really big into sports. But this podcast that you are doing right now is now into my rotation because of the the genuineness, the authenticity of it. And I really mean that. I'm not saying that on here just to say it. I think what you're doing is what I hope the trajectory of society goes for. And that's what I'm hoping for our podcast. The podcast is This Week Explained. You can find it on all of the Podchaser or podcatchers, everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you are listening to this and you can't find it on yours, please reach out, because I will put it on there. I want as much of the information out there to as many people. We're on YouTube as well. We're not video, but we are an audio YouTube podcast as well. And it comes out, once a week, usually on Fridays. Right now, I'm in the middle of the desert during the week, so I don't have a chance to record when we usually do, which means it's a little bit delayed. And that's only because I'm not trying to fit within a time frame. If I don't have the facts or the information on something, either we will delay the podcast or it will not get into the podcast, and I'll use a different avenue to put that stuff out. So This Week Explained is the podcast, and that name came about. We were hanging out with friends in a brewery trying to figure out the name, and we talked about what's the John Oliver show? Something like This Weekend or something
like that, or This Week Today, or This Week Today, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And I was like, what about This Week Explained? That way it's all the information from the week and we just explain it right here. So that's the whole basis on that. And that feeds into the company is Aucoin Analytics. It's AUCOIN Analytics. We're on Instagram, X, even all the X offshoots, which I don't get on much anymore, like Blue Sky and I think was it Mastodon or something like that. We're on there. If we build an audience on there, we'll put the information, but right now those just don't look too viable. And yeah, that's everything that we're doing. We also have a newsletter. It's called the Need to Know newsletter. We do it through Beehive. And that all is need to know is actually one of the caveats of your clearance when you're an intelligence analyst. Just because you have a top secret clearance doesn't mean you know everything. You have to actually be part of special access programs that give you need to know. Well, while all the information that I have is unclassified, people still need to know. So it's the Need to Know newsletter, and we will take some big geopolitical events from the weekend that maybe we didn't discuss enough on the podcast and put that out as an intelligence product, so that now if you're looking at that newsletter, you can kind of see what an intelligence product looks like.
Nice. I just joined that this week for the first time, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
We have an incredible newsletter coming out on Monday. A good friend of mine, former intelligence analyst, and a Colombian national who actually left Colombia to be in the U.S. military and is now back in Colombia, did some analysis on Argentina and the elections. And we're going to do an analysis of competing hypotheses. So you're going to see two intelligence analysts possibly coming up with two forms of intelligence based off of the same information. So it's a big one. If you want to read it, sign up, get into it. If you sign up after it's released out, there's a website that has all of them on there.
Awesome, Kervin. Well, hey, thanks again so much. And like, as we're talking about authenticity and manufactured authenticity, I will not be editing out the gunshots that did happen. That was not, I just hope everybody knows it was not a soundboard. There was nothing but my print, my paper, and my pencil here. That was my neighbors. I'm going to go make fun of them and tell them they're going to be famous now, because I literally told you what they were going to do as I saw the four-wheelers go by. And sure enough, they lit them up and started firing. So every once in a while,
that's predictive analysis.
Exactly. So, those gunshots are not a soundboard. So, hey, thanks again. You enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I look forward to talking to you again, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. You do the same. Stay safe out there.
If you're an aspiring entrepreneur or one that's looking to expand, contact the FreeMind Network today, and we'll help you scale. We'll help you start. We're going to be there for you in your corner.